What if we really believed that? What if we believed that loving each other was the only thing that was real? What if we believed that all the rest of it was unreal and that's the only thing that was real? Like, that's something to think about, right? You guys always give me something to think about. You think you're coming here for me to tell you something to think about? I get it from this side right here, so thank you. Thank you. Well, I mentioned before that we're in the middle of this series about being able to come here into your spiritual community, which I'm saying this must be your spiritual community, you're here, and find some direction. Find some direction. Find a way to use these spiritual principles and use these ideas to live during the week, to live in other areas of your life. And I'm saying that that's a really important thing, because we have to make these teachings relevant. Otherwise, they just stay here on a Sunday, and what good is that? So in this series, we're really trying to get this laser focus on our own self and determine if we want to make a change, if we are willing to live more radically than we have in the past. Because this stuff is radical stuff. This is not stuff that we see all the time as we're bombarded by the talking heads on the news and the TV. So we have to make some effort here. And the first week I talked about the idea of moving in, zooming in. Remember that? What if life was really more about what we find out zoomed in and the love we feel and how people treat us, rather than zoomed out when we're sitting behind our computer and aligning ourselves with big groups of people that we don't know? That's maybe not the way life is. Maybe it is being zoomed in, right? And I talked about that, and we said, people are hard to hate close up. We need to move in. We need to move in to know that. And I gave you the story of Daryl Davis. How many read that story, went home and looked at that on the computer, and took a look at what he's doing? Oh my gosh, it is radical. It is radical for a black man, a bluesman, who plays the piano, and the way he is dealing with the Ku Klux Klan is to befriend them, is to be right there beside them, and decide that that's the way that things are going to change. And according to him, he's got a stack of Ku Klux Klan robes that show the power of what he's been able to accomplish. One man, my hero, I shared with you. Last week I talked about the second practice that Brene Brown talks about in her book, and it was about speaking truth to BS but being civil. And the first step in doing that was to recognize our own BS. Like when we are talking about something so emotionally that we can't see because we have the blinders on. We don't even listen to anyone else's opinion because we have to be right and there's no other option. Or when we talk about stuff we have no idea about. And I mentioned things like the trade war, or what's happening in Syria, or the effect of Obamacare on small businesses. Unless you're a small business owner, you probably don't even know. I don't know anything about it, but we like to have opinions about them, right? And that's BS. And in order to be standing in our truth, in amongst other BS, we have to recognize it in ourselves and tame that in ourselves. You see, all this spiritual work, and the reason this place isn't overflowing to capacity at this moment, is that this stuff is work and you've decided to engage in it. Because it takes some effort. I don't have a bunch of rules for you. I'm just kind of pointing in that direction and saying, hey, take a look at that. You might want to decide to live more radically. You might want to decide that. So this week I want to talk about the next practice that Brene talks about in her book. And I want to read this to start. She says, we are in a spiritual crisis. And the key to moving out of that crisis is maintaining our belief in the inextricable human connection. That connection, the spirit that flows between us and every human in the world, is not something that can be broken. However, our belief in that connection is constantly tested and repeatedly severed. When our belief that there's something greater than us, something rooted in love and compassion, breaks, we are more likely to retreat into our bunkers, to hate and judge from afar, to tolerate BS, and to dehumanize other people. She calls us out pretty good. She said, people are wonderful, and they can be hard. My favorite Peanuts cartoon is Lioness crying, I love mankind, it's people I can't stand. You know that line. Everyday life can be incredibly hard, and the people around us can push us to the very edge of our nerves and civility. So what are we to do? What is the antidote? How are we to be who we want to be, our highest selves, in the midst of all of that? You know, we really do, I think, want to find meaning and connection. We really do want to connect with people. But too often what we do instead is back off because it's hard. It's some hard work to be connected to other people. But that's exactly what we need to do. In order to actually feel our connection, in order to feel the oneness that we talk about, if you're in unity or if you're at Spiritual Soul Center, we talk about oneness, that we're all one. But we have to be able to connect to feel that, right? It's not something you just talk about. It's like you don't talk about playing tennis, you got to go out and do it if you're going to get any good with it. And it's the same thing with oneness and connection. We have to be out there. We have to be in the mix. We have to not just talk about it, but show up in the company of strangers. We have to be willing to put ourselves out there and either figuratively or actually hold hands with strangers. Well, many of us do this, and we just did it really during meditation, did we not? We came into this place, I hope, of being peaceful, of being still. And let's face it, you don't all know each other. You might be acquainted with each other, but we're strangers in a way, some of us. But it was important. It feels different when we connect here in meditation, doesn't it? It's not that we can't connect with the divine in our favorite chair, in our favorite meditation cushion. It's not that that's not possible, but it feels different when we're here. We know something here that we don't know as exquisitely when we do it by ourselves, to feel that. And in order to know that, we have to show up. In order to feel connected, we have to show up for that stuff. We have to show up for moments of peace and ease and joy, and we have to show up for moments of pain and sorrow and grief. We've got to show up for the whole thing. Because those moments remind us that we are connected. They remind us that we're part of something bigger. Now, when I was thinking about these ideas, I remembered, as you might too, when I give you these examples especially, how it's been in your life when you've made that connection and how good it's felt when it's been joyous. So the first thing I thought was way back in the 1970s, the late 1970s. Some of you remember it, some of you haven't been born yet. But Rocky Horror Picture Show. Anybody remember the Rocky Horror Picture Show? Even the youngsters do, right? Well, when I was in college, I saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show like more than this many times. And I would go with my friend Mary Ann, and we would go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and we would go with our spray bottles and our toast and our beer at the time. They didn't kick us out of the theaters at the time. We had this community of people. We had this connection that was joy-filled. It was so much fun. I went time and time again. Every time that Mary Ann was willing to go, we would go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Fast forward a few years, more than a few years, in the 90s when I was diagnosed with cancer, and after I had gone through my treatment, I decided that the best way that would support me would be to connect in a cancer support group. And so for a while I was with these women who were strangers to me, but who I felt connected to in a big way. I mean, that was a pretty amazing experience for me. And after a while, it was not what I wanted to do, but while it was fresh for me, oh my gosh, it was the best place for me to be. It was the best place for me to be. Fast forward even a few more years, and I was on a women's build for Habitat for Humanity right here in Wilmington. It was all women building this house. Never met one of them before I showed up. And we created, it was this connection, it was this heartfelt connection. I felt part of something way bigger than that house. Way bigger than that house. It was amazing to show up for those moments, to recognize that things are bigger than just me, that this connection is powerful. Many of you will remember 9/11. Do you remember what it felt like after that day? I'm sure many of you remember where you were. 3,000 some people just went in these colossal high-rise buildings just to dust. And man, it was different, wasn't it? It was different. You'd be riding around in your car and you'd look at people differently. It didn't look the same. It was weird not to have planes flying in the skies. It was just a different time. I felt connected to something way bigger than that. There was a candlelight vigil not too long ago, I guess at the beginning of the year or the end of last year, downtown here in Wilmington for prayer for stopping gun violence right here in Wilmington. I didn't know many people there, but I wanted to be there. I'm going to show up to connect with that energy. And one of the most powerful places I connected with that energy was the saddest thing I've ever been a part of in my life. It was a funeral for a young man who had committed suicide, who had a young family. And his daughter was in the front of that chapel crying out, "Daddy, Daddy." And he was never going to be there for her. And it broke my heart. Tears were falling down my face. But you know what? It's important for us to be there. What if all these kinds of moments are really sacred moments? What if all these moments, the joy-filled and the pain-filled, are all holy moments? What if it's necessary for us to be there so that we recognize this connection and this oneness that we talk about? What if that's the case? I think it is. This is how we hold hands with strangers. For our own self, we show up to remind ourselves of the connection we have with each other. But sometimes what we do in those places, whether it's in joy or in pain, we show up like this. And we're just kind of waiting for it to be done. We just kind of are distracted. Maybe we roll our eyes. Maybe we put our earbuds deeper into our ears, look down at the floor instead of up smiling, wait for our husband or wife to be done with whatever they're doing so we can leave. And we actually throw up walls and decide not to be connected. We take that connection point away from ourselves. Isn't that crazy? Because we're afraid. We're afraid to be vulnerable. We're afraid to be vulnerable. We think vulnerable means weak. And we think that if we let down our guard, if we show that we are touched by something, that someone will call us weak. When I would say we need to become exquisitely vulnerable in all those situations. Exquisitely vulnerable. The origin of that word vulnerable, when I looked it up on dictionary.com, says this. It says vulnerable has an origin of capable of being wounded. The origin of vulnerable is capable of being wounded. I say it's capable of showing up as love. That's what it really is. It's capable of showing up as love. Because you are just deciding that it's more important to put your heart out there than it is to protect it. Capable of being shown up as love. I read a story on NPR recently about the parents of a girl who was killed at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Are you ever going to forget the name of that high school? It's 3 long words, and I don't think we'll ever forget it. And their daughter was killed. Her name is Carmen. She was 17 years old. And they have decided that it's important for them to go to the March of Life in Washington, D.C. Here's what the mother said at the end of the article. She says this. "It was hard in the beginning, and it's still hard," she said, her voice trembling, "because we miss Carmen. But missing her does not feel like enough anymore. Missing her does not feel like enough anymore. It's not enough to sit in the bunker for them, to sit in their home in Parkland. It's not enough anymore. They are craving that connection. It takes courage to show up and experience other people's pain. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to be with people who are in pain And for you and I to show up genuinely as our full selves. You really need to check yourself. I want to know if you can honestly say that you have never said this before when you're crying in public. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Why do we apologize when we cry in public? Why do we do that? When the situation itself is calling for us to shed tears and to be vulnerable. We want to apologize for, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. We want to chuck it back. We think that is a sign of weakness, when what it is a sign of courage. The courage you have to be vulnerable, to stuff that back. Why do we do that? We're afraid. We're afraid. That's crazy. We need to realize that when we do those kinds of things, we're showing how much we care. We're showing up as love. Let me tell you what Brené Brown says about this topic. She says, not enough of us know how to sit in pain with others. Do you know that? Not enough of us know how to sit in pain, not to fix it, not to make it better, not to hold back tears and be the strong one. But we don't know how to sit with pain of others. She says this, I have started to believe that crying with strangers in person could save the world. Crying with strangers in person could save the world. She says, an experience of collective pain does not deliver us from grief or sadness. We need to erase that from our mind. Just because we're there doesn't mean we can make it all go away. Has that ever been successful with anybody? No. You know that's not true. But what it is the ministry of presence. It's a ministry to show up. It's the ministry of presence. These moments remind us that we are not alone in our darkness, and that our broken heart is connected to every heart that has known pain since the beginning of time. That's a different way of looking at it, isn't it? It makes a difference, you know. It makes a huge difference. It is brave to show up, to experience the pain in community with strangers, to feel connected, to show up for the funeral, to show up for the protest, to show up for the vigil, to put yourself there in person, to get out from behind the computer, from the TV, and to show up. It takes a lot of courage to be there, and it's essential for us to know our oneness. I believe that's true. I believe that's 1,000% true. We have to get out of our bunker and be willing to show up. As well for the joyful times as for the painful times. As well for the joyful. You know, we have this saying about joyful times. A lot of us have, maybe. You know, we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. We don't want to be too joyful, because then something bad's going to happen. We condition ourselves that way. Why? Why not think, whew, never a shoe will drop again? Yeah. Why are we thinking that way? Why not? Why not? You know, we're afraid because we think we'll be found out for our flaws. You know, I don't want to dance too much. I don't know that dance step, so I'm not going to dance. I don't want to sing because I really can't sing that well. You know, why don't we really sing? You know, when they sing happy birthday to strangers at restaurants? Why don't we just sing out? Why don't we really mean it? Let's connect. You know, they're fabulous about it at Mexican restaurants. They're clapping and they're doing all that stuff. And most of us are just sitting there waiting for it to be done. Oh, every time I come in there, there's another birthday. What? Let's connect to the joyful moments. Why not? Why not? Because we're afraid to be found out. We don't have the best clothes, or our hair's a mess. We didn't take a shower that morning and we just skipped out, and, you know, it's, what? Really? It's all right. We need to participate in that. We need to show up for those moments of joy. We need to go to the concert and light the phone thing. Well, we used to light the lighters. But, you know, I guess it's a fire hazard now. You've got your phone. But we need to show up for that and be happy to be there and look around and feel the connection we have. I mean, that's amazing. To experience oneness and not just talk about it. We need to lean in to joy. We need to lean into those painful times. We need to realize that this is our humanity and our divinity, what we're experiencing. Both. Leaning into it. Here's how I'll close today from this quote from Renee. She says, so, to seek out moments of collective joy and to show up for moments of collective pain, we've got to be brave. It is brave work, I'm telling you. That means we have to be vulnerable. In all my research's 200,000 plus pieces of data, I can't find a single example of courage that didn't require vulnerability. Can you? Can you think of one moment of courage that didn't require risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure? I can tell you that every Sunday it's emotional exposure up here. Anybody who can stand in front of someone and just say, well, here I am. And you do it all the time too, my friends. It's not just here. It takes courage to be vulnerable. She says, I know the answer is no. You can't be vulnerable without that. No vulnerability, no courage. I've asked too many people who say this, including special operations soldiers. We have to show up and put ourselves out there. When the singing starts and the dancing is underway, at the very least we need to tap our toes and hum along. Okay, so no excuses about the joyful times. And when the tears fall and the hard story is shared, we have to show up and stay with the pain. We have to feel that connection. We have to be our awesome selves. We have to trust that we can handle it, that we are essential, that this is important work every day of our lives, in the joy and in the pain. So let's take that deep breath. And as we go into meditation, let's realize how important it is for each of us to show up, to not be distracted by our cell phone or what somebody else is telling us of the importance of us showing up. But believe me when I say, it's important, it's essential that you be there. Remember, crying with a stranger could actually heal the world. That act of kindness. So again, breathe in, breathe out. And one more time, a deep breath in, and back out again. And say to yourself, me showing up matters. Me being right there next to that stranger, to that someone I don't know, it matters. It matters more than I understand in this moment, but I believe it matters. It matters in the joy, and it matters in the pain. It matters. Jesus gave us a simple instruction. He said 2 words, 3 words. Love one another. Love one another. Simple, true. But here's the thing, we've got to show up. We've got to show up in person. We've got to feel our connection. feel the oneness that we are. And my friends, that love one another comes naturally. The great master, teacher in Jesus knew that and demonstrated that. Love one another. Show up for the pain. Show up for the joy. And love one another. We don't need a big book. We don't even need to write it down. We simply need to show up and remember to love one another. So as we close this time of rejuvenation, this time of meditation together, breathe in and breathe out. Take a deep breath, feel your chest rise and fall. And return to this place and time refreshed and ready. Show up all over the place. Everywhere, with your full, amazing self. Vulnerable, exquisitely vulnerable. Renewed courage and bravery. To be the love that you already are. How sweet it is to recognize that truth. So on our last breath in and out,